Welcome back to Stamping at the Warren, and I'm Kim Tolton, and today we're going to be using the Paislies Posies embossing folder stamp set even. It's a photopolymer stamp set and it is so my cup of tea. I love anything that has that vintagey retro feel, and this is very much reminds me of my childhood in the 70s with the very bold patterns we had on all our clothing, etc. So the card that we're making is this one here, and it uses a sponging technique and then we emboss over the top, and I'm using the beautiful copper embossing folder for this one. So the supplies that you're going to need is obviously the stamp set, Paislies and Posies, and then you need the detailed floral Thinlits for dies, only if you want to have the embellishment I've got on here. Actually, I'll just open this so you can see what I mean. So when you open this up, I've put a panel on the back so you can either stamp that with your greeting, or you can you could write your greeting on there. But when you open it up, can you see that I've used the floral Thinlits dies here, and I've sponged both sides, if you like, so which is why I put a white panel on the back, because it hides where I've sponged the extra. So that's kind of what we're doing. And let's pop that to one side. So you need the Thinlits dies if you want to do that. You don't have to. You could just stick with without putting the extra bit on, without the die cutting. So you've got that. Then you want some of this very luxurious gold. It's satin ribbon. I'm just trying to think. It's quite wide. Is it on here? I can never remember if the width is on here. I think it is. 1.6 centimetres. Yeah. So it's fairly thick, and that's what we're going to use to close this gatefold card. You then need a sponge. So I'm using a Stampin sponge. There's a panel for the back for when we want to hide up our inky messiness, and that measures 14 by 10.1 centimetres, 14.4 by 10.1 centimetres, and then an A4 piece of thicker whisper white cardstock, and this is the main panel that we're going to be using. From an ink pad perspective, I'm using Peekaboo Peach, crushed curry and rose red. It's a lovely combination, all very rich colours. And then for your embossing, no need for an embossing buddy, because obviously we're sponging both sides, and we're sponging the whole thing really. So then you've got your copper embossing powder, your Versamark, and then you just want a tray or piece of paper in which to collect all of your excess embossing powder. So let's begin, shall we? Now you are going to get into an inky mess, so if you don't want to be getting in an inky mess, put on some latex gloves is my recommendation. It doesn't bother me about getting in an inky mess, but there you are. Not everybody feels that way. Some people just don't like it. I find Swarfiga is the best thing for getting it out quickly. Up comes my Stampin trimmer. Now you could use a combination of your Stampin trimmer and your scoring tool, but I just don't have the depth in here to use the scoring tool. So you want a piece of cardstock, thicker, remember, thicker A4, whisper white. So it needs to be 14 point 8 wide. So we're making a standard A6 card. And then remove that little strip, turn it round, and you want this to be 20 centimetres. And that's probably almost the right size for the back piece. Now, we just need to score this at 5 centimetres and 10 centimetres, 5 centimetres and 15. So I'm just going to use my scoring blade. Make sure that your cutting blade is well out the way, otherwise you end up cutting it. Score. You could either score at 5, rotate it 180 and score at 5, or just go straight along to 15. There we go, and that's the card base made. You then want your bone folder and just fold and burnish these folds. Okay, and there's a reason I'm doing it before I sponge, and that's because it actually inks up those edges and it makes it look rather nice. So there you can see we've just got a standard A6 sorry, gatefold card. Right, so now the inking begins. So get your Stampin sponge and you're going to cut it into 4 you want, so you want 3 different inks, and we're going to sponge the inside and then fold and sponge this side. Okay, so we shall start with crushed curry. If you've been watching my videos, you know this is very much what I love. I do love sponging and embossing, and do you see what I mean about the crease marks? So you want to keep this fairly random and just put some splodges of ink in different places. So the whole aim is that we end up with extra colours where we combine everything. So next I'm going to use rose red, so a fresh piece of sponge, get that nicely inked up, and then put some bits in and just let it blend into that yellow. And make sure you're inking up your edges as you go. And this red is such a beautiful intense colour, and normally I try to get you to have it beautifully blended, but actually once we emboss this, these swirls on here actually add to the interest on the card. So I'm actually saying to you, don't worry too much about it this time. Right, I just want a little bit more here. So put different pressures on and you'll get different effects. So that's the rose red. We're going to come back to these as we do the front, or what will be the front. Right, so next piece of sponge. And this is Peekaboo Peach. And you watch. It reminds me of drumsticks. Do you remember, do you know drumstick lollies, tutti frutti things? It kind of reminds me of that, and raspberry ripple. That's what these colours remind me of. So what you're going to do with this beautiful peach is blend in where there's holes. And make sure you've got full coverage all over that piece of cardstock. Whilst we've got peach out, we can now turn this over and we can ink up on here. And you're doing just the same, nicely random, and it will ink up these edges at the same time. So that's Peekaboo Peach finished with. We'll come back to Rose Red. This is such a lovely, I love cherry cobbler for Christmas, but the Rose Red, oh, is just divine. It's probably the most common colour I'm asked to use for wedding cards. And remember, you've just got to leave some space for that lovely yellow, that cherry cobbler. Alright, so that's that one, that's Peekaboo Peach, and I've lost the sponge I had for cherry crushed curry, there it is. Right, so this one can go away, and next we come back to crushed curry, just for this last little bit. And then what is going to happen, I'm going to actually use my heat tool just to help dry off the ink, as it will help when we come to the embossing, so we won't have quite so many funny little bits and pieces. We'll get nice crisp effect. Right, so just make sure all of those edges are inked up nicely. And check on the inside that everything is inked up nicely. It just gives a nice finish. Right, so that is all of the inking done, and you can see I've already got in a bit of a mess, but I don't mind. Okay, it's just going to get a little bit noisy. Start on the back, and if you do contaminate this white panel on the back, don't worry about it, because you can put another white panel on there just to hide up any excess colours that's got on there. Sometimes it happens, I do it often, so I just add an extra white panel. You could even sponge that back panel and have just a smaller strip for writing on, and that would look equally nice. This just, as I say, it just helps stop getting embossing powder in places we don't want it, and you'll see how the colour changes as the cardstock dries as well. And turn it over. Most of the drying will have been done from the other side, so it won't take too long. And you'll also notice that I've had a piece of my grid paper that I've already used, and I use that, I've just folded it in half and used that for me to ink up on, so I don't get an inky mess everywhere else. It just protects your worktop. That's it. Right, so we can start with our stamping. That's going to lead to our embossing. So you want your Versamark ink, and I'm going to show you what I've done here. Hopefully you can see it, but perhaps if I bring it up a bit, you may see what I've done there. So what I've done is I've taken my, let's have a look, what size is it? I can never, it's blocky, so it's not the largest block, but acrylic block, but it's the next one down, And what I've done is I've mounted a whole collage of the stamps from the stamp set, from the Paislies and Posies stamp set. And that's given me a block, so it's a bit like block printing that I'm doing. So let's start with the front. And just make sure your Versamark ink pad is nicely inked up. And you will find that the pattern will go right across that piece of card. Do the same, and this time I'm going to rotate the block by 180 degrees so we get a slightly different pattern. And just if you pick up and just have a look at an angle, you'll see where you've already stamped. Stamp again. And again, don't be too particular because we are going to be die cutting this as well. So just pop that in your tray and plenty of the copper embossing. This would look beautiful with gold embossing as well. Give that side a flick, turn it over and sprinkle this side. Off. Give it a nice flick just to get any excess off. Straight away pop the excess back in your container just so the embossing powder doesn't fly everywhere and emboss what stuff that you don't want. I'm just going to shake mine off. Right, in comes the heat tool again. And because this has just been used, it's going to melt all nice and quickly. And just use gentle circular motion, working backwards and forwards, and hopefully you can see just how quickly that embossing powder is melting. Go, that's that side done. Can you see how pretty that is? It's just stunning. Okay, turn it over. Now we're going to repeat this on the inside. So back in with the Versamark, ink everything up, and I kind of go in a brick pattern. So one goes here, ink up again, this time go back to front, ink up again, and this time we're going to just keep an eye on where you've been. we're going to go across here. And just check you've got some patination everywhere, which we have. Pop your ink pad away. Bring in that tray again. One side and just sprinkle that last bit over here. And there we are. Actually, I can see I've got a spot there that's missing. So just up there. And you could even, you know, if you miss any bits and you notice it after you've embossed it all, don't worry, just go back, just pop some more on. Right, just pop this in here. And because we're embossing on both sides, you now want to put away, actually not destroy, but get rid of this sheet, this top sheet of paper, because there will be Versamark on that sheet from where I've been stamping using the block, and that means embossing powder will actually melt through, and when you heat emboss it, you find you end up with bits that have got stuck on the back. Okay, off we go again. So same as before, small circles, and the magic happens so quickly. I just think this is so beautiful. It's a beautiful technique. And it's just the most divine stamp set. Switch it off and then just rub your eyes over the whole thing just to make sure you have got everything embossed. Do you see what I mean about how beautiful it is? And then you have it on both sides. Right, next step final step is the die cutting, and didn't want that, so we're using just the narrow piece, these detailed floral thinlits, and we're going to pop them not right up close because we're going to use them as a place to put the ribbon through. So let me get my big shot up. There we go. Right, okay, so the sandwich is, get it right this time, it's the multi-purpose platform. If you're like me, you've got the old one, it's on tab 2. If it's the new one, you want both the main platform plus the, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a little one that goes with it. So that's what you need. Okay, now it's easiest if you don't put it in the die first. So my die is up at this end, and I find it goes through easier. Now, even though I'm using the precision plate, I do find if you run it backwards and forwards a couple of times, you get a better cut. Off, you should find most of it comes away, and if you just have a look on the other side, now can you see not all of that has cut? So what do? You put it back on, and you will find that the die slots back in, and it's because of the embossing. It just it just gives it a little bit, because it's plastic, it makes it work a little bit harder. There we go. Hopefully that's okay. If you just pop it over, have a look, you should see most of it will be coming away. Tap out any excess, turn it around. I'm not popping everything out for the moment. And if you put it through a little bit further, and then we want the die on here, so remember, centralise it with your fingers so it's roughly equal, and a few millimetres away from the score line. Top cutting plate goes in, and again we're just going to go backwards and forwards a few times, to make sure everything gets cut. Sometimes if your big shot is getting a little bit older, you need to put a shim in, and a shim could be a piece of vellum, or it could be a piece of cardstock, just to make it a little bit easier. Right, that's not gone through as nicely as I would like, so I'm just going to pop it back in. I've just turned it around, and it is down to the embossing, because it is, as I say, plasticised. It's just melted plastic basically, and that should be sufficient. So big shot down, gonna carefully peel that die out, and then just use your fingers to flick out those little die cut pieces. You might have a few here and there that are a bit more stubborn, so you can get your paper piercing tool just to poke them through. And if you use your paper snips on the other side, and you'll feel how plastic it is. Obviously be careful that you're not taking away big sections. and you're left with these few little bits that just need a little helping hand. And you can keep these and use them in other projects as well. Just have a nice poke about. It gives such a pretty finish to the card. I've made one of them, it's a larger one, I've done a 5-inch square one for a friend of mine who's getting married and she's invited us, so I decided to make one for her acceptance card, and it does look really, really pretty. I think if you're making something that's a little bit special, it is worth that extra little bit of effort that you put in. I know not everybody appreciates it, they don't appreciate the skill that's involved in making a handmade card, but those people that do are always very appreciative and thankful for receiving such heartfelt cards. And I think that's the whole thing with handmade cards, is that they are heartfelt, otherwise we wouldn't do them. Right, the other side, again just have a poke around, make sure everything's come out. Most of it's come out whilst I've been fiddling around with the other piece. We're just about there, I think. Probably find that some other little bits will come out, but pretty much should be done. And then you can decide whether you want it this way, so it's showing on white, or whether you want it going in this way. And if, like me, you've been a bit overzealous with the, and you've caught a bit of paper, if you sponge it, it will just blend in nicely. Lost the red one. There it is. You can see it. So I've got a piece there. And a little piece there. I've just managed to pull away a little bit of the plastic and it's pulled it away on top. So just a little bit of sponging hides that. Don't tell anybody else. They'll never know. Right, that goes in the bin. And now we just finish off. So, and then you find even more bits. Always the way. Right, So there you go. Next, and literally we're final bit now, take a nice piece of that gold satin ribbon. You put one piece through one of the nice big holes on the front, and you do the same with the opposite side. Gently close it, and here is how I do knots and bows. So with the card facing you, tie your knot. Obviously don't pull too tight. Hold the knot, swizzle your card around by 180 degrees, and then you put one loop going away from you, pick up the other one and have that going away from you, have them roughly the same size in length, bring it through, and then you can turn it back, and from there you can start to pull on the tails to get the length that you're after and the size bow that you're after. There we go. And then just a nice tidy up the ends. And it doesn't matter which way you have your card because they are identical either end. So there you have your finished card. Let's take this piece of manky paper away and you'll see it nicely then. There we go. And there is your finished card, and I think that is very pretty. I've now got embossing powder absolutely everywhere and loads of little pieces. So that's today's card, and I really hope you enjoy it, and I really hope you have a go. I would love to see your version of these. I'd love to see the different colour combinations that you come up with, or you know, anything. And you could actually have a little greeting on a tag here if you wanted. That would look quite nice. And it's really up to you. Now obviously if you have contaminated the back piece, you just get that piece of cardstock and just stick it on there and it will cover that up. You could even decide to sponge it, and as I say, just put a sentiment panel on top. So that's today's card. Lots of techniques combined into one. If you have any questions, please leave them in the show more section or the comment section below. Beneath that, I will ensure that all the products I've used and their product codes are in there, along with the sizes for the cardstock and the sandwich for the big shot with the precision plate, so that you can get that right rather than me. I always get it wrong, always. I have a mental block about it. I always get there in the end, it just takes me a bit of time. So don't forget that the tutorial will also be on my blog, and you can find that by either clicking on the link below today's video, or by clicking on the little eye icon you will be able to see in the top right hand corner of today's video. All my social media information will be in the show more section as well, and I love to see people following and also join the community Pinterest board, Stamping at the Warren. So if you click on there, there's a link on my blog and you can just click on there, start following the board, and providing I can see that you have a good interest in papercraft, I will send you an invitation to start pinning. I've got a lot of pinners on there, lots and lots of creative ideas in one space as well. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch today's video, and I look forward to seeing you again very shortly in the well, very shortly. There you go. I was going to say very shortly in the coming year, but that's a little bit off, isn't it? I'm a little bit out of sync there. Didn't have a good night's sleep. Never mind. Lovely to see you. Ta-ta for now.